So, as I mentioned a few months ago in a previous video, we are getting a Scarface remake. And as I also mentioned in the previous video, we seem to have been getting a remake of Scarface ever since the original 1983 Brian DePalma film with Al Pacino, which itself is a remake. But this new one seems to be actually happening, and it has been written, or is going to be written, by the Coen brothers, and the director will be Luca Guadagnino, the man who helmed Call Me By Your Name and the recent Suspiria remake. He's got a new television show coming out, HBO's We Are Who We Are, which will be a coming-of-age drama about some American kids growing up on an Italian military base. As this sounds very similar to his Call Me By Your Name film, Guadagnino addressed criticism that he's retreading old ground in a recent interview. "I will never complain about people's laziness," he said. "But that sounds very lazy. Call Me By Your Name is about the past seen through the prism of a cinematic narrative, and this is about the here and now. This is about the bodies and souls of now. I think they are so different. The effects of the 2016 election are still being felt right here, right now. The seismic shift throughout America and the world of what it meant that Obama's presidency was followed by Trump's presidency, and how people did not see it coming, are still being grappled with. It has to be said that just as Berlusconi was the autobiography of Italy, Trump can also be seen as a sad chapter in the autobiography of the United States." This talk of retreading and remakes, including the fact that he remade Suspiria and his A Bigger Splash is based on a 1969 film called La Piscine, got the conversation steer to his next project, a telling of the rise and fall of Scarface. "People claim that I only do remakes," he said. "But the truth of the matter is cinema has been remaking itself throughout its existence. It's not because it's a lazy way of not being able to find original stories. It's always about looking at what certain stories say about our times. The first Scarface from Howard Hawks was all about the Prohibition era. 50 years later, Oliver Stone and Brian DePalma made their version, which is so different from the Hawks film. Both can stand on the shelf as two wonderful pieces of sculpture. Hopefully ours, 40 plus years later, will be another worthy reflection on a character who is a paradigm for our own compulsions for excess and ambition. I think my version will be very timely." You know, I'm kind of bored and exasperated at the idea of a Scarface remake now. You always feel that Hollywood will ruin it. How many recent remakes of classic films have been good? Pretty much none. What we are getting are films like Ben-Hur and The Magnificent Seven. Why do we even need these movies? That being said, I do think Guadagnino has a point here. As I mentioned in my previous Scarface video, though the film itself has reached a status where it's iconic, this is a film that I do think can be remade successfully. It's not so much the name or the IP, which I imagine Hollywood executives want to cash in on, but the story template, which is pretty universal. You've got a low-level immigrant who makes something of himself through illegitimate means, creates a criminal empire, and then meets his demise once it gets too much for him. There's actually loads of movies with that story that aren't called Scarface. For example, I watched a recent film called Birds of Passage, and it reminded me a lot of Scarface to such an extent I think some people could see it as inspired by Scarface or even a remake, and yet it was so different. Thematically, it was about the loss of culture and traditions in Colombia due to the drug trade. So they took the template of the classic rise and fall gangster story and utilized it to tell a new and different story. And also, I didn't like the Guadagnino Suspiria remake. I reviewed it on the channel if you're interested. But I do give him credit that he made something that stood on its own 2 feet. It wasn't cashing in on Dario Argento's original film. It felt like its own thing, made it in its own style. And that's what I want to see in a Scarface remake, if a remake has to be made. Don't have some political correct PG-13 film where some teenager tries to do a Cuban Al Pacino impression and the film is forgotten about within months. Take it to a new environment. Make it with a new style so that it stands on its own. Go to town. And by judging the Suspiria film, which is the only film from this director that I've seen, he'll probably do just that. So what do you think of this Scarface remake? What do you want to see them tackle? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.